Well, hi everybody. Welcome to the Neon Museum. I'm Mitch, education specialist here. And tonight, by popular demand, we're going to take you on a night tour, focusing on the Tim Burton Exhibition, but also looking at some of the other signs in our collection. So, Tim Burton's people actually approached us about putting this exhibition together. We were flattered, we were thrilled because this is the first time in almost 10 years that Tim's artwork has been shown in the United States. Now, the title of the show is Las Vegas, and that's based on Tim's memories of Las Vegas and many things that don't exist anymore. He's been coming here since he was a child with his family. He's lived in Burbank, California, and they spent a lot of time at the Dunes Hotel. You might recognize behind me this sign, which is the symbol of the show, the Las Vegas sign. It resembles the old Dune sign from 1964. It was designed by Lee Clay, won lots of awards, and became a Vegas icon. Now, if you're really sharp, you might notice another reference to old-time Las Vegas. Did you catch it? They're the stars. They're from the Stardust. And the Stardust pylon went up in 1968. We'll talk a little bit more about that one as we go through, but another Vegas icon. One thing I want you to notice about this sign, you'll have to follow me to get a little bit closer. Looks a little dinged up, a little banged up. This is a brand new sign. This was designed by Hartlauer, and they did a wonderful job making it bashed up and old. You can see how we've got peeling paint there. We've got crackling there. It looks like it's rusting. This was all done before this even arrived on the scene. And then we installed the light bulbs. They were brand new. And Tim Burton was on the scene. He's a very hands-on guy. And he took a look at that and he said, no, this will not work. Brand new light bulbs and what's supposed to be an old sign. So we came up with the solution where we would dip the light bulbs in a diluted glue. We rolled them around in the chat here on the ground, and then we were able to put them back in, and they look appropriately crusty and dusty. Now, if you'll swing around here, on my right, your left, this is the neon grid, also designed specifically for this show and based on Tim's memories. In the center there, we have 3 seahorses. Those are based on the seahorses that were at the dunes, and they're much larger than the seahorses that were actually in the dunes pool. Tim's taking this from the perspective of a child, and so a little surprise here. If you look to the far left under the blue seahorse, you can see a small child there. Can you see the waves? Yeah, that's Tim Burton as a kid swimming in the water, and you can see his wild hair. And then to the left, we have Spiral Eye Girl, and she is currently vaporizing a tank there. She's also a symbol of the show. She represents, as you might have heard, the hypnotic nature of Las Vegas. Next to her is a sign for the Area 51 Motel. Area 51 is that secret military installation where supposedly there's alien activity going on. There really is no Area 51 Motel, or if there is, it's a secret and we don't know about it. On the other side, at the bottom, can you see the face with the red lips? Yeah, that's a showgirl, but she's an alien showgirl. That's her name, alien showgirl. And in her hair, all tangled up, are spaceships and all sorts of outer space creatures. Now, we're going to turn around and we're going to head into the boneyard. This is laid out in a circle. And we go back geographically and historically. We start with old downtown Las Vegas. And at the end of the row, we're going to hit the motels, small businesses and restaurants, and then the Las Vegas Strip. As we do, you're going to see various objects that were created by Tim Burton for the show, or given a Vegas storyline. What's interesting about this exhibition, we have a room of some stuff, but for the most part, his art is integrated right into the collection, and you have to look for it. He included Easter eggs, so some of the stuff's not so obvious. He wanted you to discover it on your own. So follow me on in. We'll see if we see anything Tim might have left for us. And over here around the corner, we have Martians. Anybody remember the movie Mars Attacks, 1996? Yeah, these are creatures from the movie. They weren't actually in the movie. They were made specifically for this exhibition. They look rather ferocious. In the movie, they were pretty naughty, but so far they've been pretty polite here. They haven't touched any of the signs. They've been really good guests. Now, if you've seen the movie, you might recognize some of the signs you're going to see in the Boneyard. That's because it was shot in another boneyard called the Yesco Boneyard, Young Electric Sign Company. That was back in 1996. We were just being formed at that point, and Yesco had a boneyard like a lot of sign companies do. They would take old signs and they'd either cannibalize them for parts or they'd refurbish them. Later, when they disbanded that boneyard, a lot of the signs came here. So as we walk through, you might see some that were in the movie. This is an example here. This is from the Golden Nugget. This is a 1970 sign. I know it says 1905, but that's really an homage to downtown. So follow me on down, and we're going to take a look at this beautiful pink and white sign. Now, this sign's important for a couple reasons. One is the woman that designed it, Betty Willis. If you don't know Betty, you know her most famous sign, right? Welcome to Fabulous Las Vegas, 1959. The other reason why this sign is so important is because Moulin Rouge is the site of the first major resort in Las Vegas to racially integrate. Las Vegas was segregated at that point. 5 years later, in 1960, the Moulin Rouge is also the site of a meeting where the community, government, and the casinos get together, and they, for the most part, agree to integrate. So, historic sign. Unfortunately, the property no longer exists. Come on down, we'll take a look at it and see if we find any other Tim Burton creations lingering about. Oh, here we have bugs. So why are these bugs hanging out in the Moulin Rouge sign? Well, there's actually an explanation. It's on the other side here. So these bugs had something they all could agree on. Nothing tastes better than an old piece of neon. This is a neon sign that was made specifically for this event. The bugs were actually repurposed from a prior exhibition. And this is Tim Burton's handwriting. You notice it looks a little grimy even though it's brand new. What we did here, came up with the solution where we took the paint that's used to block out the neon, diluted it, and applied a couple coats so it looks appropriately grimy. If we could go back to the bugs for just a second, because this guy's my favorite. You can see he's smiling, he's happy, he's obviously very well fed. His partner's not so well fed, and they look shocked. I think they failed to follow the cardinal rule for eating a neon sign, which is to unplug it first. So follow me on down. As we do, we're passing by a lot of signs from famous Las Vegas casinos downtown. Binion's Horseshoe. That opened up in 1951. Everybody should raise their glass to Benny Binion. He's the one that popularized free drinks while you're playing the slots, so good work. We'll talk a little bit more about the Flamingo when we get to the strip side of things, but we've got the Fitzgerald sign. This came to us in working order, and boy, is it working. This is about the brightest thing on the downtown side. Fitzgerald's opened up as the Sundance in 1980 and became Fitzgerald's in 1987. These days it's the D down on Fremont Street. It's owned by Derek Stevens, and he's from Detroit, so a lot of D's there. As we head on down, over here, great sign by Charles Barnard, master sign designer, also literally wrote the book on Las Vegas sign designers. And hidden underneath, Beetlejuice. Any of you see that movie from 1988? This was a version of the sign that was hanging over Beetlejuice's grave. Now this is brand new. This was made for this exhibition, but doesn't it look appropriately grimy and stained and scratched up and flickering? It uses the name Beetlejuice twice, and there's a reason for that. If you haven't seen the movie yet, you got to see it, and you'll know why it only says Beetlejuice twice. So we're going to come around, and we're going to leave downtown. We're going to hit the motels and look at this beautiful sign here on my right, your left, from the Yucca Motel. So the Yucca is a 1950s sign, and the motel used to be on Las Vegas Boulevard, just north of Sahara, close to where the Strat is today. But what's really magnificent about this is the neon. If you look at the top of the yucca flower, and by the way, they really do look like this, you can see it's been rendered in neon. This is incredibly hard to do. Neon tubes, when they start perfectly straight, the neon benders work over torches, hot gas flames, gently bending, and they've got a problem. So now imagine you're the neon bender, and just to make it easy, you're bending a rubber tube. As you bend the tube, what's it want to do in the middle? Wants to crease, wants to kink, right? Can't have that. The gas is not going to flow through. So what do? They have surgical tubing in their mouths. They blow a stream of air through, keeps the tube puffed up. So a lot of hand and eye coordination there. Now, how did they get the colors? I called this neon tubing, but that's not really technically accurate. Neon is a gas that glows red-orange, and when they don't want that red-orange color, they'd prefer something more along the blue. They use argon. Argon glows a pale blue. They intensify it by adding mercury. And you're looking at these and saying, well, they're not red, they can't be neon, and they're not blue, they can't be argon. Well, they also can coat the tubes with phosphor. So if you look at the top of that flower there, you can see it's white. It's got a white phosphor coating inside. And you might be able to see at the tips of the tube where it's not completely coated that there's a blue glow. Down below, we've got green. Well, how do they get green? In this case, they used yellow glass, or it's colored yellow, and they've got blue argon inside, so yellow and blue make what color? Green. I like to point out we have two magnificent views here. If we could just look back for a sec, I think the grid wall, La Concha, and the Hard Rock that's just one of the prettiest sights here. The other one is right behind us in Motel Row. We've got Cowboys and Indians. Come on down, I'll tell you a little bit more about them. Now the cowboy here, does he look familiar? He should. He's Vegas Vic. Now, Vegas Vic is not just one sign. He's a character that was created by the Chamber of Commerce in the 1940s to advertise Las Vegas as a Western destination. This is a period of time when the world's falling in love with the romantic image of the West. The frontier's closed, and so it's all cowboys and Indians. We actually had materials advertising Las Vegas is still a frontier town. We were never a frontier town. We were a railroad stop, but don't let that get in the way of a good advertising campaign. So the most famous version of Vegas Vic is actually in front of the Pioneer Club, the old Pioneer Club down on Fremont Street. He's still there. Now on the other side, the Chief Hotel Court. Beautiful sign. I've loved this sign ever since I moved to Las Vegas. It was actually still up when I came here. But there's an issue with it. Here we have a stereotypical image of a Native American. This is actually a Plains Indian, and that kind of erases the existence of the actual Native Americans who live here. The Paiutes, they have a colony that's not very far away from here. So while it's paying tribute to Native Americans, it's actually sort of ignoring them in a twist of cruel irony. This is an electric sign at a time when the Paiute colony did not yet have electricity. So follow me on around. I'd like to see if we find any more Easter eggs. Here's one. We have boy with nails and eyes in his eyes. And this is a Tim Burton creature. This was actually made prior to this exhibition, but he's been put into Las Vegas. He's one of the characters in a Tim Burton book called The Melancholy Death of Oyster Boy. And these are poems about sad, kind of comically grim characters. They're all actually, Tim Burton said, alter egos of himself. He kind of came to that realization while he's putting this together and said, well, if my characters are my alter egos, and I like coming to Las Vegas, why shouldn't they come to Las Vegas? So they're all here. Now, if we move down, can you see there's somebody peering out at us? See the eye? Let's find out who it is. It's Jimmy. Jimmy's full name is Jimmy the Hideous Penguin Boy. That name was given to him by his so-called friends. We like him. We call him just Penguin Boy. But here's his backstory, another one of these poems in Tim's handwriting. I have a vague memory from when I was a boy that I worked in a circus for Siegfried and Roy. So he's been given a backstory as well. Siegfried and Roy, of course, if you don't know, being those famous magicians with the white tigers that used to perform. Come on around. We're going to leave the motels and hit small businesses. What do we got here? This sign is called Guns and Booze, and you can see this is a smiling clown with a bottle of liquor in one hand and a firearm in the other. And this is based on memories Tim had when he was younger, coming here and seeing stores that sold alcohol and firearms, all one-stop shopping. I actually think I remember this store, and they had a pharmacy attached, and the sign actually said Guns, Drugs, and Booze. So everything you need, right there in one location. This is an animated sign. You can see how it's moving back and forth. And I'd like to show you another great animated sign right in here, all the way at the end. This sign is from Steiner Cleaners. Doesn't even just make you happy. I mean, it's just joyful. We named him Mr. Happy Shirt, and Mr. Happy Shirt was designed by Steiner's daughter. This is the only sign in the collection that was designed by a child. And by the way, you can see this is what argon looks like, so a good example of argon right here. They famously did laundry for Liberace. You got to wonder, how did that guy get his clothes done? He had a coat that had 4,000 rhinestones on it. Well, he would bring it into Steiner. They had a seamstress cut off all of the rhinestones so they could launder it. And it was her job for the rest of the week to sew them all back on. So, on the other side here, one of the symbols of Las Vegas, the portable Margarita glass. This is from a restaurant called Margarita Baby. Great display of neon. The Red Barn with the cherry cocktail there. This was an antique store in the 1950s, and then in the 60s it became a bar. At night, it would cater to a gay clientele, and in the 70s they just opened up as one of the first openly gay bars in Las Vegas, one of the few at that time. It has since closed and burned down, so sometimes these signs are all we have to remember these historic properties by. Well, if you follow me on around, we'll take our last look at the Chief and the Nevada Motel in Vegas Vic, and Guns and Booze. And then, little quiz for some of you who are younger. If you're of a certain age, you're going to recognize this guy and what he does. This is Andy Anderson, the milkman. He's from Anderson Dairy. This is a 1950 sign, beautiful neon, and I like him a lot because he comes from the 1950s and he's still working. By the way, this profession might be making a comeback. We'll see. This is a little dark, but I have to stop and just mention the green shack here. This is the oldest sign on display. It was started in the 1920s by a woman named Mattie Jones, a very enterprising woman. She sold fried chicken and bootleg whiskey out the windows of her house. This sign is not from that era. You can see they're advertising cocktails, so it has to be after the repeal of Prohibition in 1933, and there's anecdotal evidence that it was around by 1939, so between 33 and 39. And as we head around, House of Lords is also a little dark. I do want to point it out. This is one of the movies, one of the signs that you'll see in Mars Attacks. This was the scene where Danny DeVito is trying to make nice with the Martian, and then he reveals he's a lawyer and he gets vaporized. So that's the way it goes. Over here, we have pirates. These are Tim Burton creatures that were from a drawing done in the 1980s for a movie project that was not realized. And so he turned them into pirates here. The guy with the circular head, I call him Lemonhead. And over here, this fellow, I call Edward Scissorshead. And the reason why they're here is because of this guy behind us. Anybody recognize it? This is one of the two fiberglass skulls that used to be on the pylon sign in front of Treasure Island. Anybody remember the family-friendly era here? 1993, Treasure Island opens, and there's a pirate show, the Battle of Buccaneer Bay, and it's all about the kids. And then 10 years later, they move away from that, and it becomes an adult show called The Sirens of T.I. 10 years after that, they just get rid of the show altogether, and there's a pharmacy there now. So it kind of follows the life cycle of some of us. You go from Disney to sexy fantasy to pharmacy. All right, we're going to, by the way, we're now in the strip section. And as we come around, might see some more Tim Burton creatures. We're also going to see some strip signs. Wedding information. Who's getting married today? A group of pirates. I'm not sure who's the best man. None of them look like they are the best. This is a tribute to bad living and bad dentistry. Tim Burton creatures typically have these incongruous physical features. They're not physically possible. If you look at this gentleman here with the hunchback and the spindly legs. By the way, he resembles a flamingo a little bit, which I think is ironic because they put him in front of flamingo signs here. These are 1970s vintage Flamingo signs. A lot of people think that the Flamingo was the first hotel in Las Vegas, that Bugsy Siegel started everything. That's absolutely not true. The Flamingo was the third hotel on the Strip, and Fremont Street was already going strong. Bugsy Siegel wasn't even the first one to start the Flamingo. The first one who did was a gentleman named Billy Wilkerson. Wilkerson was a nightclub owner and restaurateur from Los Angeles. And he was the first to break with the Wild West theme. The first casinos on the Strip were the El Rancho and the Last Frontier. And he came up with this very elegant, think of Hollywood in the 1940s, sophisticated, California modern kind of place. Unfortunately, he did not get to see the Flamingo open. He was a gambler. He ran out of money. You couldn't get a loan from a bank back then, so he went to Bugsy Siegel and his friends, and they opened it up in December 1946. Unfortunately, the weather was poor. The folks from LA couldn't come in. Bugsy had not yet completed the hotel guest rooms, and the whole thing was a bit of a disaster. He closed up, opened later in 1947. Too late for him. He was assassinated that year, but we get to enjoy the Flamingo. These beautiful wings, designed by California designer Raul Rodriguez, who was mostly known at this point in his career for designing floats for the Tournament of Roses parade in Pasadena. So he comes out, has this brilliant idea for a pink bouquet of feathers. The Flamingo is still using his design 40 years after it was done. So that's not bad for a first foray into Las Vegas signage. So follow me on around. We can see Jerry's here. This is a sign that was restored by Jerry's. It dates to the 1960s. They restored it for their 50th anniversary. And if you want to learn more about how signs like Jerry's are restored, there's a documentary film produced by PBS. It's called Restoration Neon. You can look that up on YouTube, I believe. As we turn, this is really the money shot here, I think. This has got to be like the shot for the whole Boneyard. with the Stardust, the Riviera, the Hard Rock. Now, the Stardust opened up in 1958, and it was a bit of an architectural dud. There were just buildings with guest rooms that were laid out like army barracks. And so what they did was, a designer from Yesco, his name was Kermit Wayne, came up with the system where he wrapped the whole building up and it unified everything into this design. It was a very famous sign. It was actually the widest sign in the world back then. It was 216 feet long. Letters were 27 feet high, had over 7,000 feet of neon. And this was later called a decorated shed, where you take the whole building, just a plain building, and you gussy it up. And Las Vegas was famous for doing that. Later you see it done with the Golden Nugget, Binion's, which is still around. Now, that was 1958. How did the Stardust top itself? 10 years later, they put up the tallest pylon sign in the world. And you can catch some of it here. It's not lit up. This is the top of the pylon sign, and it actually stretches all the way past the Riviera here. And you're thinking, well, that's pretty big, Mitch, but come on, 188 feet. Well, you're only looking at 3 pieces of the sign. There are 9. As I said, when it was all together, 188 feet. To give you some idea how big that is, take a look at the Hard Rock guitar here. That's 82 feet high. So add over 100 feet onto that, and you'll have some conception of how big that Stardust sign was. Now here, these Stardust letters, they were not part of the '68 sign, but they are the same famous style of lettering. And we've recently rebulbed them, so it's come back in its glory. Above that, we have the Riviera. That was the other sign that was donated to us in working condition. The Riviera famously opened up in 1955. It was the first skyscraper on the Strip. Back then, they were worried that the soil couldn't handle the weight of a tall building. Boy, were they wrong. And Liberace here. This is from the Liberace Museum, and which has since unfortunately closed. This is the other sign that's in restoration neon, and you can see all the work they did to restore this. This was a wall sign. It was actually, once you took it off the wall, kind of flimsy, so they had to reinforce it. The neon had to all be redone, and it's just a fabulous story of sign restoration. So follow me on down. As we do, we've got the Desert Inn here, which used to stand where the Wynn and the Encore are now. Famously occupied by Howard Hughes for a while. And, oh look, more Martians. So, looks like we've come to the end of our journey together, at least for today. Thank you so much for visiting us. If you're interested more about the museum, we have a website that has all kinds of wonderful things. It's neonmuseum.org. We have blogs, we have films, we have quizzes, all kinds of fun stuff for people who love Vegas and love our signs. Again, neonmuseum.org. So thank you for visiting with us today, and we look forward to seeing you again in the near future. Thanks.